Bonjour, je suis Diana et bienvenue to another doll repaint video. So a while ago, I decided to make a series of rabbit girl dolls that are based off of the different colors of the rainbow. It's been a while since I've made a doll for the collection because I've been, working on different projects like my tarot doll collection. In the past, we've made Ruby the red rabbit and Sunny the yellow raver rabbit. And today we are hopping back into the series with our green rabbit, who I've named Fern. There were a couple different directions I could have gone with a green theme, like a nature-inspired look or a commentary on envy or materialism. But for today's project, I really hyper-focused on the idea of a bright green mohawk and the in-your-face counterculture fashion of punk. I love so many different styles of fashion, but I've always been particularly enamored with punk fashion. And once upon a time in my youth, I even dabbled in it myself. My blunter years aside, I think green can be a very in-your-face color, and I love the idea of our green rabbit being a little spitfire who speaks her mind, cares about the welfare of the world, and just lives her little punk life as authentically as possible. So let's go on a repaint journey together. But before we get started, please be sure to hit that subscribe button. And if you like my videos, please support my channel with your likes. It only takes a second to hit that like button, but it's a huge way for you to help my channel grow and to support my art. Alright, with all that being said, enough talking, let's get started. For today's doll, I knew I wanted to go for a doll that already had green skin. For this project, I could have gone with Casta or Amanita, but I ended up going with this Venus McFlytrap doll. I chose Venus because I plan on giving this doll a large mohawk, and I feel like with Venus's pointed chin and longer facial features, it would balance out the mohawk better. Casta and Amanita have rounder faces, and I don't want the mohawk to overpower the doll's face. I really wish I could have used the area that had the undershaving, because the really short hair, which is also known as flocking, is perfect. But alas, I'm going to remove it using some acetone. I'm going to soak her head in boiling hot water to remove the head from the doll's neck peg and to get at the old hair plugs in her head. Here is our hair and paint-free canvas. And the next thing I'm going to do is remove Venus's humanoid ears. Venus is a plant monster and she has these really cute leafy ears, but since we're transforming her into a bunny, she will need ears on top of her head instead of on the sides. After cutting the ears off, we're left with some rough patches, but I've already come up with a plan on how to cover these up later. So we've cut off one set of ears, and the next thing I'm going to do for Fern's transformation is construct her bunny ears. Like with my other bunny girls, I'm starting off by making some armatures out of some tinfoil. This provides a base where I can create two evenly sized and shaped ears. Then, after they're cut out, I'll cover them with some Sculpey clay. I've added some extra foil at the ends of each ear that will act as a tab that I'll insert into a hole that I've already gone ahead and cut into the top of her head. After I finish shaping the ears out of the clay, I'll bake them in the oven and then super glue them into the slots in her head. I've let the glue dry for a couple of hours and I've checked to make sure that they're securely in place. Now I'm going to start planning out the placement for her mohawk and where I want the shaved sides to lay. For the mohawk, I've decided to go with green yarn wefts, which I made using brushed out acrylic yarn. In the past, when using yarn hair wefts, I typically would make them into strips with glued edges to hold the strip together. The glue strips work really well, but I always seem to struggle with having like too thick of glue edges, which makes the hair really hard to work with when it comes to hiding the glue edges on areas like the part lines. This is because you kind of have to like fold the weft to like hide the glue lines, which is hard to do when the edges are too stiff. Because a mohawk is a strip of hair that sticks straight up, I foresaw the need to fold a lot of glue edges over, so I decided to experiment a little bit and I brushed out the yarn wefts completely, and I'm going to be using this reroot tool to plug hair like I would with typical nylon hair. This may or may not be a new method for applying yarn wefts, but I haven't seen anyone else do it, so I'm really hoping that it works. To start this hairstyle, I'm going to apply hair plugs while following the edges of the section that's marked off in pen. This will let me build the structure of what will be the body of the mohawk. Now that I've put in both sides of the mohawk, I can gauge the thickness of the hair, and I've decided that if I add more hair between the two rows, the mohawk will look too chunky. So I'm going to leave the middle of the body empty, which should be fine once it's styled. The end of the mohawk will need to be filled in to prevent there being a large gap where you can see between the two rows of the hair plugs. I'll be adding 2 rows to cap it off, which will give me more length to pull the hair into a large fan when styling. For the front of the hair, I'm going to fill it in so that the hair can transition from the mohawk down into some bangs. To do that, I'm taking some of the front pieces of the rerooted hair and flattening them down. Then, just like I did to the back, I'll be adding some rows to the front section of the mohawk to fill it in and create a part line for the bangs. Past the part line, I'm adding another row of hair that will later be styled into her bangs. Again, I'm making sure that I don't add too much hair, but at the same time, I want to make sure that there's enough coverage so that you can't see Fern's scalp. I'm like really happy with how the hair application went, and I'm definitely curious with how rooting yarn hair will work with other styles of hair for other dolls. For the last bit of rerooting, I'm going to be covering up the old ear sections with some hair wispies. When I was looking at pictures of mohawks, I saw a lot of styles that left little sections of hair to the sides, which will provide the perfect coverage for the old ears. Next, for her hair, I need to make some flocking to give the impression of short, buzzed-down hair to the sides of the head. After I make yarn wefts, I always have a lot of fluff left over from brushing the yarn out. I always save this to make flocking or stuffing, and here I'm going to be using some leftover white fluff. To make the flocking, I'm going to have to cut the fluff down into almost a powder, which causes little particles of yarn to float around in the air. When I do this part, I always wear a respirator to protect my lungs. I've pinned her hair back to provide me with a clear area to work, and I'm applying some Elmer's glue all to the sides of the head and to the ears. Then, taking the flocking, I'm pressing it into the fresh glue, letting it dry, and then I'll repeat this process until the scalp and ears have full coverage. I'm using white flocking as a base so that I can go in with my soft pastels and shade these areas to give them dimension and color variations. So here we have the dried flocking, and before I start shading with pastels, I'm going to cover her mohawk with some plastic wrap, which will provide the hair with some protection from the pastels and the sealant that I'll use to lock the color in. I'm also going to wrap the hair wispies in some masking tape to protect them too. There has been a lot of work to get to the actual face-up stage, so I hope you're still with me. Now is the time where we can finally jump in with our pastels and start the repaint. To keep things from smudging, I'm starting Fern's repaint with her scalp and ears. Starting with her scalp, I'm coming in with multi-shades of green, and I want this part to be darker than her mohawk because a lot of times buzzed hair will look a lot darker than longer locks of hair. Now for the ears, I'm starting to fill it in with that same green color, and it's kind of looking a little rough and patchy, but I'm hoping that adding additional greens will blend things out and make it look put together. Yeah, no, it's definitely giving me some crack fox vibes, so that's not gonna work. On to plan B. For plan B, I made flocking out of the fluff that came from her green hair wefts. I didn't want to use that before because I wanted there to be some color differences between the ears and her hair, and I was worried that using the same color would make everything kind of get lost in each other. I also don't have a different green yarn, and I can't get to the store right now. So yeah, this one will have to do. Okay, detour over. The new flocking has dried, and I'm shading the inner ears with a dark shade of green. Next, I'm going to be taking my sealant, Mr. Super Clear, and seal the pastel pigments in, and I'll also be giving her face 3 coats of it as a primer for the repaint. Mr. Super Clear provides a nice paper textured surface that will allow pigments something to adhere to. For the first layer of Fern's face up, I want to give her some undertones. An undertone is the color that shows from underneath the skin's surface that affects the body's overall hue. You can have either warm, cool, or neutral undertones, and for her green skin, I'm using this purple color to give her cool undertones. The areas that show most undertones are predominantly areas that have thinner skin and show more of your blood vessels, so that's where we're going to be applying the purple to Fern's face. After sealing our undertone layer, I'm taking a deep green color and working it into the recessed areas of the face, which will give her face some dimension. A lot of these areas are in the same places that we added the undertones, so it gives the skin a lovely blended and layered look between the green and purple tones. After adding the dark contouring, I'm picking up and redefining the highlighted areas of the face using a yellow-green color. For our next layer, I'll be adding texture to the skin by spraying on watered down acrylic paint using a little toothbrush. It gives the skin a freckled and mottled appearance that I think gives my dolls a more realistic look, since real skin isn't perfect. Humans have blemishes and discolorations and different textures to their skin, and that makes us all different and uniquely beautiful. I want my dolls to be real in their own right and uniquely beautiful, so I really love this part. Today for Fern's skin, I'm using a dark green and pink color for her skin texture. With the freckle layer set with sealant, I'm now moving on and giving her cheeks and temples some blushing using a red soft pastel. I'm really loving how the red of her blush is standing out from the green of her skin, and it's giving her a really nice rosy glow. So one thing you might be noticing is that there are some rough patches on her skin. This is from my Mr. Super Clear sealant. Unfortunately, this sealant is very finicky when it comes to humidity and temperature. Right now, it's fall time and it's been cold and raining nonstop for a month, which has made my Mr. Super Clear a very unhappy camper. But fear not, I was able to tame my face up, and in the end, there won't be these awkward pigment patches. It's just not a doll repaint without one or two mishaps in the process. Time to start blocking in her eyes. Taking a red watercolor pencil, I'm first drawing in the waterline of her lower lid and her itty-bitty tear ducts. Jumping forward a bit, I put in a highlight for her lower lash line, and now I'm working on defining her eyelid crease and blocking in where I want her upper lashes to go. I'll be giving her a cut crease eyeshadow look, so I want to make sure that we don't lose the area of her eyelids and that we have enough space to add eyeshadow under the brow bone. To go with her cool undertone look, Fern will be getting blue-green eyes. But for now, I'm just going to block in the iris position with a watercolor pencil. I decided that I wanted to give her some more prominent freckles, so using a small brush, I'm dipping it into brown acrylic paint and lightly dotting her face. As far as intensity goes, I don't want them to be one note, so some freckles will be softer and some will be stronger, just like real freckles. To the bottoms of the eyes, I'm coming in with a black watercolor pencil to start laying down the foundation for bottom lashes and to give it the appearance of a smudgy lower lash liner. To the upper lid, I'm setting up the lash line and the base of her winged eyeliner. I'm also deepening the color of the eye crease to start getting that cut crease makeup look. Above her eye, I'm starting to work in the foundation for a scar that will go through her eyebrow. I have this little story in my mind that Fern got this scar one night when she was at a show, and there was a mosh pit, and someone in the pit completely forgot their mosh pit etiquette, so Fern had to jump in and protect others because that person was taking it way too far. Next, I'm going to finally add some details to the irises and the pupils. I want her eyes to have a speckled look, so while they're going to be predominantly blue-green, I'm throwing in a couple different colors to give them a layered, marbled look. Since my super clear is misbehaving for Fern's face up, I need to come in with some paint to get the super fine details that I want in her eyes. Using some white paint will allow me to come in with a lighter watercolor pencil shade to give some texture lines to her irises. While I wait for her paint to dry, now is the perfect time to start blocking in her eyebrows and lips. I'm sticking to greens for both areas because I want them to look like a natural part of her face. Off camera, I used acrylic paint to give her a really deep green lip look. Coming in with a light green watercolor pencil, I'm giving her lips some texture lines. I'm giving the lower lip more texture because the lower lip usually sticks out more than the upper lip does. So the upper lip is usually more in shadow and doesn't show as much detail as the lower lip. The last thing to do for her repaint is to just darken up some of her eyebrow hairs and define them just a little bit more. It's kind of a little dance of adding some darker hairs and then adding some lighter ones until I finally end up with a nice pair of eyebrows. And again, everything has been sealed with Mr. Super Clear, and I want to add some finishing touches to her face. The first thing is adding some gloss to her eyes and lips to make them shiny. After that, since Fern is a punk rocker, I think it would be fitting to give her some piercings. For now, I'm just going to be giving her face a nose stud, and I'm going to be using a little caviar bead. These beads are usually used for nail art, and I think it's the perfect size for her nose ring because it stands out, but it's not too overpowering. If she was a bigger doll, I might give her something that stands out a little bit more, but since her proportions are so small and there's a lot going on with her look, I don't want to bog her down with too much of a look. It's all about balance, you know? And now let's start working on her body repaint. Like her face, Fern's body got 3 layers of Mr. Super Clear to provide a textured work surface that will allow us to apply pigments. Her repaint will follow the same basic rules that we did for her face-up. Purplish undertones followed by deep green contouring and green and pink paint for texture. I want to fast forward a bit here because we will be adding some really fun details that will add to her punk look once we finish her skin tones. So not all punks have tattoos, of course, but I feel for a really fun punk rock doll, she has to have at least a few where her skin's showing. I had a lot of fun looking up ideas that would fit well with her overall look, and I'm starting with a fun little snake going down her leg. To stand out against the green of her skin, I decided to make all of our tattoos black with some white detailing. I tried drawing them on with pencil first, but that started to carve out the super clear, so I'm just going to wing it and paint each tattoo on. It's kind of risky, but at least with punk fashion, gritty and messy can be a good thing, or at least that's what I'm telling myself. Here's a close-up of her leg tattoos. On one leg, we've got a snake, a Ouija board placard, dagger, and a little cross and a little moon. On the other, we have a flower, skull, infinity symbol, starburst, and a little eye. Now, on her hands, I want to add a couple of little tattoos. I've seen a lot of hand tattoos that have little symbols on the fingers, so I want to get the impression of those. Since they're going to be so small, I can't give them a whole lot of detail, so they're just going to kind of be random shapes to give that impression. So now that Fern's repaint is complete, it's time for our green rabbit to get some clothes. First on the list are these little shorts that I bought for her. I had a hard time finding black shorts for Monster High dolls, so these were actually made for Blythe dolls. They're a little too big for her, so I'm going to have to take them in a bit so they have a better fit for her body. Here they are after I took them in, and now I'm going to start working them over to go with her whole look. First, I'm cutting some rips into the legs of her shorts. So they look a little too much like intentional cuts, so with this nail file, I'm going to distress them so they look more like real rips. Next up, I want to decorate the shorts. A lot of punk looks feature homemade patches and a variety of studs and other bits of decor. So with the chalk pastel, I'm blocking in where I want different items to go on her shorts. So because of the small scale of the shorts, I'm going to paint the patches directly onto them. Usually the patches would be stitched on, but I'm going to try to give the appearance of white stitches using my paint. So now I'm going to start painting on the actual design of the patches, and I'm just adding some symbols that I think will look cool on her shorts, like some small X's and a little weird rabbit skull. For the other leg, I want to add a block of studs, and I'm using these small square nail charms. Nail art items are really a godsend for doll painting because they're usually the right size for dolls and you can find almost anything you need. Next, I'm giving her a jacket where she can add more patches and customized items. These are pretty popular in the punk scene and I've seen them referred to as battle jackets, but the majority I've seen have been created using black leather jackets. But since she's our green rabbit, I wanted to give her a green look. Plus, when you're punk, you can do whatever you want. So, using this mini checked green fabric, which is so freaking cute, I'm going to start making her jacket. I like to think that she found it at a thrift store and added every little detail to it herself. I've cut out all the pieces of my pattern and here's how the construction of it went down. First, I sewed the back pieces together and I'm ironing the seam flat. I'm also going to throw in a top stitch to the seam because now that I'm getting better at sewing, I can get fancy like that. Next is my least favorite part, and that's attaching the sleeves to the jacket. I always have such a hard time attaching them without ending up with gaps in the seams, so if you sew and have any tips on this, please help me out and leave your suggestions in my comments. This jacket has lapels, and before I sew them down, I'm using my mini iron to press them flat. Then I'll sew all around the lapels to give them a trimmed look. Now I've made a little collar for the jacket, which I also struggled to attach, but I got it there in the end. To give it a more rough and tumble look, I left the ends of the collar frayed just a little bit. Now I'm going to give the jacket a little bit of an overall press and then I will sew up the sides and sleeves. After that, I'm going to flip the jacket out, hem the bottom, and then Bob's your uncle, the jacket will be done and ready to decorate. For the jacket, I'll be making actual patches that I'll sew on. To make sure I'm scaling and sizing everything right, I use the same pattern that I used for the jacket and cut out some black fabric using the front bodice piece. I'm kind of winging it when it comes to the design, so I'm just sketching in some random shapes and then I'll make up the designs as I go. First, I'm making a big block of studs again. I really liked how they looked on the shorts, so for the jacket, I wanted a much larger patch of them. For the painted patches, I'm starting with a skull design using some white acrylic paint. After painting on a few more designs and letting them dry, I'm jumping back into the skull with some black paint and adding more details. While the first side dries, we're going to get started on the other side. I had this idea of trying to make some pins for her jacket, that's what these white dots are for, but in the end they didn't quite work out, so you could just ignore these. Instead, let's focus on another painted patch that I'm adding to the bottom. If you're familiar with the geography of the United States, you may recognize what I'm drawing on this patch. As a part of her backstory, I decided that Fern is from the state of Michigan, the city of Grand Rapids specifically. This city has a very special place in my heart, so I wanted to represent the punk culture there. While Michigan dries, I'm throwing some spikes into the mix. Again, nail art supplies saved the day with these cute little spikes. I might have to sport these for a future nail look, although it might make using my fingers a bit challenging, and I kinda need those. Off camera, I painted a little feminist fist symbol because Fern is all about smashing that patriarchy. And now with some red paint, I'm adding a little anarchy symbol to my Michigan patch. You gotta have at least one anarchy symbol on a punk look. I let everything dry for about 24 hours, and now I'm going to be attaching the patches to the jacket. I cut each little patch out, and I'm going to be using red thread so that the stitching will really stand out against the pattern of the jacket. After attaching all the patches, I want to give her even more of a look, so I'm attaching some chain from the front lapel and wrapping it to the back of the jacket. I just took a necklace chain and snipped it down to size using my wire snippers. To attach, I'm sewing it on with some black thread. The row of spikes would be a little hard to sew on, so I'm going to glue it on to go along with the curve of the lapel. Here's a close-up look of the jacket so you can see where all the patches ended up being placed and get a good look at how the chain hangs. For her shirt, I pulled this dress out of my doll supply. I'll need to cut it down to convert it from a dress to the shirt, and I'll be giving her a little bit of a crop top look, which I think will look nice when paired with the jacket and the shorts. I chose this shirt because it's a really loud pattern. I wouldn't normally do this, but I wanted something that would clash with a check of the pattern, and this kind of wavy pattern on the dress really accomplishes that. The red of the shirt pairs nicely with the green jacket because red and green are complementary colors. So while it's gonna clash, it's still gonna kind of harmonize with everything, if that makes sense. For her shoes, my Venus McFlytrap doll came with these boots. They have all these studded straps wrapped around them, and I think they'll work really well with Fern's look. Here they are post-airbrushing. So for the boots, I ended up mixing a kind of blackish green color so that they mesh well with the overall green look, but don't draw too much attention to themselves. They could still use a little bit of personality though, so I'm going to accentuate those studded straps with some silver paint. It's finally time to take this crusty plastic protector off of her hair and give her her epic mohawk. I decided the first part of her hairstyle that I want to tackle are the hair wispies. The hair is still in its raw, fluffy yarn state, so I'm taking my mini iron and I'm flattening them out to give them a smooth texture, which will make them lie flatly and cover up the old ears. Her hair got all rumpled while it was wrapped in the plastic, so I've gone ahead and combed it out and did a touch of flat ironing. I've pulled it out into the fan shape that I want, and now I'm massaging a bit of clear fabric glue into my fingers, kind of like you would with a hair gel, and I'm pulling it through the hair. I'm trying to add enough glue so that the hairstyle will hold on its own over time, but I don't want to add too much and make the hair look all stiff and kind of crusty. After giving her mohawk some faux gel, I now have to figure out how to get the front of her hair to lay just right. I tried to use my mini hair iron to smooth it down and make it curve towards her forehead. It didn't exactly work out how I was hoping, but it did at least smooth it down so that it's easier to work with. My next idea is to use more of the fabric glue to make it conform to the shape of her head. I had to hold it in place for a long time, but this seemed to do the trick. Now I'm starting to trim her bangs, and I'm shaping them by using my small scissors to point cut into the hair. Right now the bangs are uneven, blunt, and choppy, and point cutting like this will give them a lighter and less abrasive look. I want to give her a couple more piercings, and since she has these big bunny ears, I think they're the perfect place to add them. To balance out the chain on the jacket, I'm going to give her a chain loop earring to the ear on the opposite side. To cover up the glue and the raw chain edges, I'm adding these little studs as earring posts. On the other ear, I'm adding 2 of those spike studs that we used on her jacket. And to the tops of her ears, I had a couple of these star charms, and I just thought they would look super cute on her. Now it's time to get her dressed and put her back together before we take a peek at the final look. And here is the final look at Fern, our punk rock green rabbit. So I know when I'm truly happy with a doll when I find myself wandering into my office to look at them when I'm not working. And I have to say that I'm kind of obsessed with Fern. I keep coming in and posing her and examining her details, and I think she's found her way into my top personal favorite dolls that I've done. Even after all the struggles with Mr. Super Clear, I think her face-up turned out lovely, and I was still able to give her some really nice details and special touches that make her uniquely sweet while still looking like a cool punk chick. It's always a little risky trying new techniques out because you never know how they're going to turn out, but I'm so glad that I rerouted her hair using the needle method. Her mohawk turned out just how I wanted it to. The yarn gave it the perfect texture to hold and support the large fan of her mohawk, and I really hope I can continue to use this method in the future. You know, it just goes to show that one of the best ways to grow in your craft is to take risks. If it fails, you learn from it. If it succeeds, you learn from it. And speaking of taking risks and learning new things, I hope you guys don't mind when I pat myself on the back for improving my sewing skills. Sewing was one of the things that almost stopped me from starting to learn doll repainting because I never really tried it before starting my channel. I think it's important to share these past self-doubts that I get with you guys because it's important to know that if you can shut these doubts out and if you can allow yourself permission to be new at something and to be able to stumble a bit while you continue to learn it, you will get better. And you can potentially unlock a new ability that you never thought possible. Do I still have a lot to go with my sewing skills? Of course, but I'm so proud of what I've been able to achieve with her outfit today. Her jacket is so fun, and I'm so happy with all the little details I was able to make for it. I think younger me would love to have a jacket just like this, and I kinda want one now. Before we go, let me know in the comments what you think of Fern, the green rainbow rabbit, and let me know what color you want me to make next. Alright. Fern and I have to go look at more embarrassing photos, but I'll see you next time with another doll repaint video. Bye!